Hello everyone. I would like to try something a little bit different with these videos moving forward and provide an audio commentary as opposed to the novels that I've been putting in the video descriptions up until this point. I think I'll be able to offer a lot more clarity around what I'm showing off, as well as a lot more detail about how I implemented that functionality and any issues I may have run into while trying to implement that functionality. I think that'll be a lot more useful for anyone who might stumble across my videos hoping to put similar stuff in their games and not being sure how to do it. And they're looking for a jumping off point that might come across these videos, and I might be able to help them. So, apologies off the bat. I am not writing scripts for any of these, so I may ramble. You might get a lot of nonverbals, a lot of ahs, ums, and whatnot, so forgive me there. And audio files, I don't have a super fancy microphone. I only have my headset, so that's what I'll be recording with. I hope it suffices for most people. So, without further ado, this video is showing off jumping over killboxes and jumping into killboxes in a 2D overhead perspective game. Now, before I move forward, I should say from experience that when you're attempting to implement any kind of verticality into a 2D overhead perspective game, you're going to run into an awful lot of forum threads and an awful lot of posts that are just going to say, just make it all in 3D and fake it. While that is a perfectly acceptable solution for some people and some types of games, that is not how I wanted to go about doing things. So proof positive here that this is all one plane. I am only using Unity 2D tools and colliders. So if you're looking for the fancy 3D trickery, I unfortunately won't be able to help you. If you want to implement verticality and some of the other bits of functionality that I'm showing off in my other videos without resorting to 3D trickery, stay a while and listen. You might learn something, hopefully. So also, I want to make it clear that everything is using tile maps, and at least initially, I implemented my tile maps and my tile map collisions exactly as I learned to in a tutorial published by Unity. It's very important because we're going to talk a little bit about composite colliders. And so say I select my ground main. I don't know how well this is going to show up on YouTube, but my outer boundaries for ground main are right here. Maybe you can see my mouse a little bit better. And then you can see some bits are cut out around the pit areas. I am using a composite collider, at least for now. This is with default settings. So if you just say you want to add a composite collider, this is the settings that it's going to give you. If I turn off my composite, you can see all of the different collisions around each and every tile. Composite colliders are recommended because there are far fewer vertices and far fewer edges the engine needs to keep track of, which is good. It helps with performance. So I did exactly as I was taught, and I used composite colliders. Now, I'm just going to hit play real quick here. So my player in my very simple 2D game here, as you can see in other videos, can walk around just fine. If you didn't want to read some of the novel or other novels that I have posted, she cannot go through walls if she jumps. And that's because my solid collider, which is the thing that prevents me from going through things, is actually attached to that blob shadow and not the player herself, or the player character herself. And that makes it so I can do this jumping without actually going through the walls. For debugging purposes, I do have this array cast that shows up in my scene view that shoots from my jumping position to my landing position. By design, you cannot change your trajectory once you're in the air. I have no plans right now of implementing any functionality for that. My game isn't going to be an action game per se, so I don't feel that that is going to be all that important. I guess it'll be more of an adventure action game, kind of, but with much heavier emphasis on the adventure. Players will just be walking more often than not. So, jumping over kill boxes, especially as I have them implemented here, is not very difficult. So you can see that I am bumping up against these pits. I cannot walk into them, but I can. Oh, well, we saw a little bit of an error that I wanted to show off in just a minute, actually. But you got a little bit of a sneak preview of it. So I will jump. And you can see that time I landed on the ground. We'll come back to that error in just a second, by the way. So jumping over pits or kill boxes is not difficult. And there might be people watching this video right now who are saying, dude, that's nothing. All you have to do is have your kill box collisions on a separate layer. Once you hit the jump button, turn off the collisions between the player and the kill box layer. And then once they land, turn them back on. And that's exactly what I did. If I select the pit layer here, and it's a little bit easier to see them if I uncheck use by composite, you can see that there's collisions all over here. Put use by composite back on. That is on the kill box layer. Apologies if you can't see it in a low YouTube resolution. If you have a 16:9 monitor, I have this ultra wide guy, so it's not going to fit on everyone's screen perfectly. And my ground layer right now says main edge. That's because I'm still doing some testing, but it'll eventually be ground main. So yeah, that's exactly how I implemented that. You turn off the collisions between the player. So my solid collider is on this player layer. So the thing that prevents me from going through things. My pits is on the kill box. Once I jump, I turn off collisions between the player layer and the kill box layer. And then I turn them back on when I land. It's that simple to jump over a kill box or an obstacle or anything you may want to be able to jump over. Now, as you could see from that error that showed up in the video a little bit prematurely, it's not always a simple matter figuring out what you're landing on. And that's where I came in, and that's where some problems started to arise for me. So here we'll land, we're good there. Now we'll land off. Now everything worked out perfectly that time, but yep, once again, doing exactly the same thing, landing exactly on that ground tile. You can see I'm getting very inconsistent results with what I'm landing on. Now, this started to happen right away. Since I have that super fancy raycast, the way I was trying to determine what my player was landing on is by taking the last collider that raycast hits and saying, okay, you're a ground collider? Well, then I know that the player's landing on the ground. You're a pit collider? Well, then I know that my player is landing in the pits. And it wasn't working. And I just showed off how it really doesn't work right now either. So what I tried doing everything from putting a trigger collider at my player's feet and have that detect things. That wasn't working. I tried resorting my raycast by distance, but the distance properties that I was getting for each collider were also very inconsistent. And so eventually what I did, and I'm going to switch to a different scene that's a copy of this scene real quick to show this off. Yeah, we'll save that. I don't see why not. Okay, so I just switched to the other scene that was a copy. This one I have my tile map set up a little bit differently though. In this one, you can see I have a pits edge and a ground main edge. The tile map renders are turned off for them, so I'll turn them on. There we go. So what I decided when I was looking at this solution was, okay, I don't want to have a ton of colliders, a ton of unnecessary colliders rather, that are taking up space in memory, having to be calculated against. So what I'll do is I won't make my ground and all of my pits all necessarily colliders. I'll just do it to the edges. And then I'll see how that works. And I was just using these renderers as a little bit of guidelines for when I needed them. So I'll turn off those renderers. So you can see they're all still separate. And at this point, I also want to point out that the final way I decided to detect what I was going to land on was, rather than try to cast the ray out, and for anyone who may be wondering, I am very acutely aware of the query start and collider setting, which when I was using casting the collider the other way I had turned off. I have it turned back on now because the way I'm detecting collisions with the landing collider now is, you see that fancy ray cast? Rather than casting it from where I'm standing to where I'm going to land, I cast it in the reverse now, and I only take the first collider that's hit. And if you remember from the previous scene, that in and of itself doesn't necessarily work. However, with these edge colliders now, you'll see that it works brilliantly. Having no problems whatsoever. Collisions are detecting very, very consistently. Even feel confident enough to do a little bit of diagonal. It'll jump right there. All right, so then you may say, okay, so the best way to detect what tile you're going to land on is to do a reverse raycast. Cool. And also to make it so your ground colliders are not using a composite. Well, that's how I initially got it to work. But I still have to have some extra tile map layers here that I have to keep track of. And that's kind of annoying. Also, even though there are fewer colliders with this edge system than there are, say, making the entire ground separate colliders, it's still not as elegant as I would like. So I'm going to go back to the original scene. So we'll expand this environment. You can see that the edges are gone and that I'm still using the main colliders. So what I really wanted to be able to do is still use the composite colliders, but there is something that needs to be changed. In ground main, under geometry type, see how it says outlines? I'm going to turn that to polygons. Boom. Now these collisions look very ugly. I'm not saying that they don't. I can probably split things in half. I really want to make them fancy, but I don't think that's super necessary. And I can do the same thing with my pits. I'm going to make that polygons. Again, very ugly polygons. But what changing these composite colliders to polygons allows me to do is use a composite collider, use that reverse raycast, and still get the super consistent collision detection with my ground. See? And then if I land in a pit, boop, I die. So that is still working as well. Now, I don't know exactly how Unity works under the hood, but my guess is that when using outlines, it's still determining this big boundary. So like right now I have my ground main selected. It's still determining that boundary as the one collider. So if my player is standing, say, right here, and I was casting the ray, if I wasn't casting from within the correct collider, it was giving me inconsistent results around how far away the colliders were. So if you want to implement this type of functionality, just to sum up, I recommend casting a ray from your landing point back to your player and taking the first collider that ray hits as your landing point. And also, still use your composite colliders, just turn them to polygons. No, it's not as efficient on the system as using the outline colliders, and it doesn't look as nice, but it's not as bad as having all of your tiles be separate colliders, and you still get those consistent results with your collisions. So if anyone has a better solution for implementing this, I am definitely all ears. I am not posting this up as I am an expert on this now, and here's how you should do it. I'm just saying what worked for me in this instance. So this will be the first video that I have comments open on. I just figured not many people would care to comment on the other videos, or you get like those really early comments or somebody's just like, oh, you're a fart head or whatever. So I'm going to leave comments open on this video just in case anyone wants to share solutions that they themselves may have come across or to poke holes in my current solution. So thank you to anyone who may have watched this all the way through this rather lengthy video and rather lengthy talk about jumping over and into Killboxes in a 2D overhead perspective game.